Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to look at some rumors that I'm very excited about. These are about the new Resident Evil remakes that are in production right now, according to a leaker known as Dusk Golem, who has reported that Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Code Veronica are currently in the works to be remade. It also debunks some other rumors that Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 5 are currently in production for remakes. There were some other rumors I had seen recently, the last couple of weeks, about Resident Evil 1 getting a remake to coincide with Resident Evil's 30th anniversary in 2026, and that is being debunked by this leaker right here, apparently. It says that, up to his knowledge, there are no remakes for Resident Evil 1 or 5 in the works at this moment. Instead, Capcom is focusing on 0 and Code Veronica, which makes me very excited. We already have a remake of Resident Evil in the GameCube version. It's not super new, but you can still access it with the Resident Evil Origins collection, which, to be fair, you can also get with Resident Evil 0 in it there, but we already have a remake of that. I think it can come later on. I think 0 and Code Veronica were the least likely to be remade, so I'm excited that Capcom sees the value in their stories that they tell in the gameplay and everything. I would really like to see them get their own remakes. I talked about this recently in my Resident Evil Ranked video, where I talked about how both of them I thought were ripe for remakes and really fantastic games that maybe need a little more time in the sun. Resident Evil 0, if you're not familiar with it, takes place before the events of Resident Evil 1. It takes place with Rebecca Chambers, who is going with the Bravo team of stars to go investigate some cannibalistic murders that are happening outside of Raccoon City. Her helicopter crash lands in the mountainside. They find this train that is an umbrella train that stopped. It was attacked by these like leeches, and he goes on board and suddenly discovers that there are zombies. This is the very first instance in the Resident Evil franchise that you see zombies, at least in the timeline. And she also encounters a person named Billy Cohen, the other protagonist of the game, who is a convict that's supposed to be executed. He was being transported to be executed for killing like 25 people. Bad guy, but in this game, you play as both of them. They have to work together in order to, first and foremost, figure out what's going on, figure out what's moving the train as it starts moving. After you get on shortly after, you have to stop it from crashing. You have to do all sorts of stuff, and you have to utilize the key gimmick of the gameplay, which is freely switching between Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen. It also gets rid of the item box in this game. It makes it much more difficult to do inventory management, but it allows you to drop items on the floor and pick them up later, which is really cool. Instead of just discarding them, you can just put them down. A lot of people criticize this, but I thought it was fairly innovative. I think it would be really cool to revisit that in a remake and see what that would look like, or if they get rid of it entirely in favor of item boxes. But I would imagine they would do something with that gimmick. Again, this is one that has a really cool story, a nice like background to the original Resident Evil game. You get more background on Rebecca Chambers. I think Billy Cohen is a really interesting character. It's a nice, smaller sized game with a lot of lore. And you have like Albert Wesker in this one. You learned about the T virus and the G virus with Albert Wesker trying to make the T virus, and then Billy Birkin making the G virus as they split directions, go their separate ways. It's a really interesting story. I really like Resident Evil 0, and I would really love to revisit it because it's been a long time since I played it. Code Veronica is also a fantastic one. This one I mentioned in several Resident Evil videos was supposed to be a mainline entry. This was supposed to be Resident Evil 3, but it was being developed for the Dreamcast, and it was taking longer because they were doing some more innovative things with it, and so Resident Evil needed a new third entry for the series to promote the PlayStation. So they're like, let's make Nemesis, which was supposed to be a spin-off, let's make that the new mainline entry. We'll make Code Veronica a spin-off of sorts. It has a ton of deep lore. This one you take control of Claire Redfield, and then Chris Redfield later on in the game. So two main characters of the franchise, which is really cool. You start off as Claire Redfield, who is investigating this island and everything. You've learned about the T Veronica virus, which is a very hybrid of this. You have a new side character. His name is Steve. I'm forgetting his last name. He's really annoying, but also really cool and funny at the same time. It's a wacky, wild story. It's definitely much beefier than Resident Evil 3 is. So I really love this game. It had the unfortunate mishap of being released only on the Dreamcast, and that didn't sell as well, but it did get ports later on to like the PlayStation 2 era of consoles, and then got, an HD version. It's on the PlayStation 4 now. I got it during during Halloween like last year for $1 on the PlayStation Store. So it's absolutely accessible. It's just a little bit old. One of the coolest things about it though is that it got rid of the more tank controls and let you actually freely move the camera, which was a first for the series. Really innovative, a lot of great ideas. It's definitely beefier. It has a bigger story. You get to play as 2 different protagonists at different parts of the game. It's fantastic. I'm really excited if the rumors are true about Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica getting their remakes. Because again, these are ones that I figured that Capcom would just let slip by the wayside, let you just go play the Origins collection or go and buy the port over to the PlayStation 4 and just leave it at that. But I like that looks like they're remaking all their core games. I wouldn't even mind like a Resident Evil Revelations at some point later down the line, because those ones are definitely newer and they already have like the HD versions on the PlayStation 3 and 4. So I don't really need those ones as quickly, but I like that they are focusing on some of the more niche games in the series, especially ones that have impact on the overall story in a major way. 0 and Code Veronica have definite lore implications that are so good for the series. So I'm really excited about that. I'm okay with them not remaking Resident Evil or Resident Evil 5 at this point, just because, again, I played Resident Evil, the original remake, just recently, and it was really great. It's still fun to play. The tank controls aren't too bad. It's not the hardest game to get a hold of. It's definitely more difficult if you play the more modern ones, and the remakes especially, but I'm okay with them holding off on that for just a little bit longer. I would expect that to be a next-generation console game, maybe a cross-generation game, and Resident Evil 5, I don't know if this one's a good one for a remake yet. I don't know how they would do with making the AI better. Hopefully that's what they would want to do with the game and keep the multiplayer aspect if you want to, but make it a single player experience if you want. I don't see them remaking that game super soon. But there have been some reports about that. So I'm interested to see what ends up being the truth, because we know that Capcom is almost certainly remaking Resident Evil games at this point. We know 9 is coming. We know that it's likely coming next year is what it looks like. So we're looking at a Resident Evil time period where we're going to be missing out on stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see an announcement for a Resident Evil 0 or Code Veronica remake pretty soon to bridge the gap between that and 9. Otherwise, we'll get 9 and then we'll get one of the remakes later on. I'm really excited about this. I love the Resident Evil franchise. I love that Capcom is remaking all their old games and doing such a fantastic job with them too. I haven't been disappointed with any of the remakes. As much as Resident Evil 3 is kind of a bite-sized experience and it's not the most faithful to the original, I like the improvements that they made to the formula so much, and the gunplay is so fantastic that I really love the game anyway. They did such a fantastic job, and I trust them to be making these fantastic games. I really want to shout out Capcom for doing what other big industries are not doing at this point. I know Resident Evil 4 has some microtransactions in it, but they're not intrusive. I'm okay with them because the game, I guess, I'm not as okay with them. I don't want them there at all. But the fact that the game is so solid and you don't need anything to do with the microtransactions to have an enjoyable experience makes me just love the game, and I can just ignore the microtransactions entirely. They are not focusing on that side of things at all, really, it seems. They're maybe putting them in softly, just letting you engage with them if you really want to, but not being predatory with them. And I like that they are really putting these single player or these story driven games first and foremost. They're not focusing on live service. They have tried in the past. They've tried with like the Resident Evil RE-verse game, the online thing that launched way later than the Resident Evil 3 remake and Resident Evil Village. That absolutely hasn't done anything. Their other multiplayer outings have been garbage. So I like that they're not focusing on those things. They're just focusing on what makes them their company so good, which is their story-driven games. And I love that they are just really zeroing in on those amongst all the other publishers and developers that are making these live service games and really preying on vulnerable people that want to spend money in microtransactions. I like that Capcom is sticking to their guns, and they're doing extremely well because of it. They're making tons of money, and I love to support them because they're making such awesome things. So I'm really excited about this. I hope this ends up being true. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and I will see you on the next one.